Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Run Cape Town podcast. I'm your host today, Jamie Hutting, and I'm joined by Coach Ntutu Letseka. Today, we are 3 weeks out from race date. Super exciting stuff. Last week, we did have a discussion with Coach Lindsay Parry. If you didn't hear that episode, I definitely recommend having a listen before today. But today, we'll be chatting about sort of the last week of hard training before your taper might begin, and then also touching on some pacing strategies or guidelines, and then the route as well, which is, of course, quite important. But before we get into that, in Tutu, how are things going?
Oh, things are good. And I'm getting excited about Cape Town Marathon and I'm not running. So I hope everyone, as we get closer and closer to the day, that you're all feeling excited and that most of you are feeling ready. But this really is now, we're now going into the final bit of it. And hopefully at this point, you should be seeing the finish line like coming into full view for you.
Yes, it's super, super exciting, especially as we generally tend to meet lots of our athletes in the meetup before the race. So getting very, very excited for that. So now for today's episode, we would have had runners, if they are listening today, which would be Sunday, then probably this weekend you would have done your longest run through your
Yeah.
training cycle or plan. So firstly, I hope that you are resting and recovering and fueling up, planning for an early night. But good news is we will sort of start to dial down the training volume from this week coming onwards. But
Yeah.
for this final sort of, I mentioned it might be the final week of sort of hard training. And Tutu, would you mind just explaining what that means if athletes have already done their longest run?
So it's not quite taper time, and we'll talk about the taper in full detail in the next episode. Look, back in the day, we would do a 3 week taper, but honestly, it might be a little bit too long for some people. And what we don't want to do is you've just done a massive week now, finishing up, you've done your longest run today or on Saturday. Um, and you don't want to now just suddenly gut your volume immediately. So what we're going to be doing in the next coming week is still maintaining some training consistency. And the biggest change is actually going to come from your long run. So if you've done, for example, on the 4 hour plan, you would have done a 3.5 hour long run. You will notice that your Tuesday session stays the same. You're still going to be doing a midweek long run. But what's going to be really changing is that your long run will start to come down a little bit. And that's the first change we make. So we start to gradually ease you off your peak volumes. So your long run might drop from 3 hours 30 to down to about 2 hours 30. So it's still a long run. So that's why we say this is the final week of hard training, because you're not now down to like an hour and a half. So you're still going to be doing a lot of training. And it really is just about maintaining consistency. We are creatures of habit, and you don't want to make sudden big changes in your training. And we will speak about this properly next week as we address now the actual taper strategies. So the key thing, though, is that, as we said, don't overdo it. So this is still, again, not the time to be cramming in more training. And I think when I say it's not taper time, people might be like, oh, well, that means I can still keep training hard. Just, we are 3 weeks out, so it's still, you are now starting to, to work your way towards race day. So one of the things is that we mentioned this last week as well, that your long run might not go to plan, your final long run. Anything can happen. We can't control the variables. But if your long run didn't go to plan, please don't try and do another 3.5 hour long run this coming weekend. Just go with the plan. Remember that we don't base your performance on what happens in peak training. That is still a training stimulus. If your long run did go well, don't now feel like you're Superman and go out and think you can just keep racing through. Stick to the plan and stick to the process and just continue with where you're going. And this is so important. And I'll keep saying this now in this last month before training. Don't test yourself. This
Yeah.
is not the time to be testing yourself. Please, whatever you do, do not enter a race this coming weekend. you know?
Mm.
And it's a problem in South Africa that there are so many races that you can actually keep entering races. This coming weekend, please don't enter like a 10K race and think, let me just make sure that I am in good shape. You
Yeah.
are in shape. If you have done your training well, you are in good shape. And remember that intensity costs a lot more. High intensity costs a lot more than low intensity. So if you do a 10K, you think, oh, it's only a 10K. It's still a lot of work, lots of
Mhm.
loading on the muscles, lots of mental fatigue, physical fatigue, and we still want you to get a long run in this weekend. So don't sacrifice your long run for a small tester, and definitely don't run a half marathon as a
Mhm.
race.
Yeah.
And for some people you might be able to get 21 Ks in 2.5 hours, for example. That's fine, but no racing. Please don't racing. Don't do any races this weekend, and then don't start trying to add things you haven't done before. If you've been doing strength but you haven't been lifting heavy weights, don't go now and start bench pressing 100 kilos because you think you need to do some extra work. Don't do that. If you haven't been doing like cycling or stuff like that, don't add it in now.
Yeah.
Your goal is on the final prize, and what you're trying to maintain now is consistency. Um, and don't start doing silly things. I think you need to look after yourself and focus again on the bigger picture. So you might get invited to go and play. I know everyone loves paddle now.
Yes.
Don't, please don't. And yeah, just avoid doing things that are going to compromise your training. I'm not saying don't have fun, don't socialize, don't do fun things with your friends, but like,
Yeah.
if you're training for a marathon, adding in another impact sport is not going to help. Something that involves a lot of sprinting and running is not going to help.
Yeah.
Don't go and play rugby, don't do contact sports. Just keep maintaining what you're doing and start working yourself towards race day. And you now need to start thinking about like the potential of getting sick before race day, and you do now need to start being aware of like your sort of like hygiene, you know,
Yes.
um, hand wash, that sort of thing, and just being aware of people around you that are sick, because you don't want to get sick now. This close to race day. It won't be the end of the world if it's a mild illness, but it does put a bit more pressure on you. So that's just sort of like at this point in your training, it's really about maintenance now. You're maintaining where you are, and then in the next 2 weeks, we're then gonna bring you to your peak, and you want to
Yeah.
be able to make the most of that. So it really just is about not doing new things, not doing silly things, and not trying to do any more, and don't try and test yourself.
No, for sure. I think as we near race day now, a lot of athletes will be traveling too, and I
Yeah,
can't remember in which format or which one of our resources this was posted in, but I know Shona has spoken about this leading up to these big marathons. You might be in airplanes, buses, trains, anything like that, or maybe not so much in Cape Town, but if you are traveling in,
yeah,
then
yeah,
just take those precautions. Wear a
yeah,
mask if you'd like. Make sure your hands are sanitized, you're washing them, all of that, just to minimize the potential risk of getting sick in those crowded spaces. um,
yeah,
but then now going into the route itself, and by now I'm sure that majority of runners have at least Googled the route, or
yeah,
they've maybe checked it out. I know that I would prefer to drive it if I'm going into a completely new race or setting,
yeah,
to really visualize the race. But speaking of sort of pacing guidelines, we did of course speak to Lindsay last week about pacing bands or pacing charts and how those work. So once again, if anyone listening doesn't know what or hasn't heard that discussion, I would recommend having a listen before this one. But and Tutu, if you wouldn't mind just going into some pacing suggestions or guidelines for athletes based on maybe a goal that they have in mind.
yeah. So I think let's start off generally speaking, and then move to more specific in relation to the actual route itself, because there are some overarching principles that you need to follow with pacing. And I think Lindsay mentioned this last week as well, is that pacing is really like, once you've done the training, you've trained hard, you've trained well, you've tapered well, the thing that breaks people on race day is pacing. Um, and I think what often happens is people don't believe that you can actually run a negative split over 42.2 Ks. It's this idea that
Yeah.
it's so long that you are surely going to fatigue at some point. So what people often do then is try and bank time.
Yeah.
And that means that they go out harder. So let's say and I've been using 4 hour marathons. I think that's a pretty like good target for most people. So for 4 hour marathon, for example, the goal pace there is 5:41 per kilometer. So it's a pretty good pace to go. So,
Yeah.
and again, if you're trying to run an even to negative split, you want to run around that pace and you want to finish a little bit quicker. What people think that they will do is they'll run the first half at like 5:30 a K and maybe
Mm.
come in at 5:45 per K and then end up running 5:38 per K. So it's a negative split. It doesn't work like that. What
Mm.
you're doing is you're introducing fatigue very, very early on. You're burning through your precious glycogen stores. Fueling is the big part. And going out too fast, that's what it does. It basically burns through your fuel and it introduces a lot more muscular fatigue in your legs. And the faster you go in the beginning, the earlier that fatigue point comes in the end. So you might find yourself starting to struggle at 25 Ks. And then the slowdown is not proportional to how fast you started. We find it is a lot more excessive, and then you end up like walking. And I mean, I can give an example. When I ran my first marathon 12 years ago, I ran the first half at like 4:30 a K. My last 10 Ks were in 71 minutes. So it is just like when the wheels come off, they really do fall off, and that's because you go out way too hard in the beginning. I was probably 5 or 10 seconds per K quicker than I should have been, and yet by the
Yeah.
end I was running 7 minute Ks. So it
Wow.
really does. It makes a massive, massive difference. So what we want with when you're pacing a marathon is that we always say you start conservatively. So, and you can break it down into different ways, but I always like to use that first 5 to 10 Ks, have it as you're sort of building up period. Like you want to start easier than race pace, and you shouldn't be hitting race pace in the first 5 Ks. You want to be starting slower than race pace and easing yourself in. And the things with a crowded race as well, people might feel tempted to start trying to weave around crowds. Like, don't do that,
Yeah.
unless people are going a lot slower than you want. But what actually you want to use the crowd to just almost hold you back and let you control
Yeah.
yourself and build up, build up, build up. And then we'll talk about how the exact nature of Cape Town's route will affect your pacing. And then, sort of, once you get to 10 to 15 kilometers, that's where you almost now want to be hitting your stride.
Mm.
And now it's all about consistency. You don't want to be oscillating up and down. And again, this is course dependent, and we'll talk about the specifics of Cape Town. And you do want to sort of now maintain an even pace. And what you're saving yourself for is people often say the first 32 Ks are a warm up for the last 10 Ks of a marathon. But you really do want to, yeah, a very long warm up. But you do really want to save yourself for those last, I'd say 7 to 10 kilometers. I'd almost even leave it to 35 kilometers, and then you want to start. Then you can start to pick up the pace a bit. And if you've paced yourself well, eased into the race in the first 5 to 10 Ks, held your ground sort of between 10 Ks and 32 Ks, 35 Ks, you will have enough energy in you to be able to accelerate in the last 7 Ks and finish well. And people don't believe it's possible, but when we have had
Mm.
people follow the pacing strategy, they end up finishing well and running 1, 2, 3 minute negative splits. And this
Yeah.
really is a thing that is possible. And you've trained well, you've done the training. So trust that you have it in you to do what you need to do in the race. So really the key thing is remember that the marathon is a long way. It's 42.2 kilometers. So you need to have that control.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have this thing that I believe in the 70% rule that every single race, whether it's a mile or a marathon, gets hard 70% into a race. For a mile, that means you're going to be doing a quarter lap. You're going to be doing 1 lap on the track
Yeah.
as your struggle point. For a marathon, that's 10 Ks of struggle.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful that while it's still 70%, the remaining 30% is like 10 Ks. So you don't
Mm.
want to burn the candle too early in the beginning. So that when you get to that last 10 Ks, you don't want to be running on fumes. You want to be able to still have strength in your legs, still have energy, and be able to then carry through. We do need to talk about the weather quickly before we just head into the route.
Yes.
It's a really key aspect to talk about. Like we know we've seen marathons where you get to the race day and it's 10 degrees warmer than what you thought it was going to be, and that changes the equation. So you can't control the weather. It's one of those undefeatable demons. So weather, hills, altitude, those are things that you cannot control. So don't try. So if we get to Cape, and it's October, we know that it's spring. and it can be warm. And like the race does start early enough. You start, I think it's a 6:15 start. But if you're going to be running for 5 hours, you're going to be running close to lunchtime, especially it depends when you
Yeah.
start. And for those runners who are aiming for sort of 6 hours, you might be out on the road past 1 o'clock. And if it's a warm day, it will get tough. But what you need to do then is, if you've got your pace guideline, you've got 5:41 per k for a sub 4 hour marathon, but it's 10 degrees warmer on race day, don't go out at 5:41 per k.
Mm.
You need to adjust your pacing accordingly based on the temperature. And if I can give you some numbers, and these numbers aren't, obviously, these are best case scenarios. If it's 20 degrees Celsius on race day for a 4 hour marathon, you're going from a potential 4 hours to about a 4:03, 4:04 marathon. So it's adding 3 or 4 minutes, just going for, because the ideal temperature is 15 degrees Celsius for racing a marathon. Just going from 15 degrees to 20 degrees adds 3 minutes onto your finish time. Going from 20 degrees to 25 degrees is adding 10 seconds per K minimum to your potential race pace. And I'm not even accounting for humidity, just the heat. Humidity is a different factor. So you can potentially be 10 to 15 seconds per K slower, depending on how warm and how humid it is. But what you cannot be doing is, if it is warmer on race day, do not try and maintain your original plan. Adjust accordingly. And the same thing goes for if it's windy. Cape Town can get very, very windy, and if it rains, rain also. People don't realize that rain is it's a very challenging condition. When you get wet, it's difficult to sweat and cool down. Though the water should be cooling you down, it's also preventing you from sweating. So it's a counter to that, and it affects your grip. Wet, slick roads are hard to grip on, and you're actually losing more time just on the contact point. So again, that adds up. And your clothes get heavy, your shoes get heavy. So all of that stuff affects it. So just have respect for the weather, and don't think that you can power your way through if it's 25 degrees on race day. Like, that's not going to happen. You're going to find yourself then at the end walking for most of the last 5Ks.
Yes, no, for sure. I think a lot of maybe athletes that might be accustomed to training in different parts of Europe might be, or even the Americas, might be quite used to training in colder conditions. But I'd say South African locals, if they are used to running in the area, through our summers, it can be quite hot. And I mean, doing time trials, even if you head out at 6 a.m, it's still hot. So I think, if you are sort of expecting whether you may be a local in Cape Town, wouldn't say it's the end of the world if we have temperature changes, but definitely for those traveling in, just to have a look out, so that you're not maybe surprised on race date about, like, I'd say 7 days before start, just checking the weather, seeing what it looks like. Of course, it is subject to change. I mean, that is the weather, but it is just nice to have in the back of your mind. I know that the recent Peninsula, or the last Peninsula Marathon, had extreme winds. So it's just nice to know sort of what type of day you're going to be expecting out on the course. Of course, the marathon distance is tough on its own, but if you've got extra weather factors adding into that, then you can just mentally prepare. But no, very, very good point to mention. I mean, weather alone, but this is Cape Town too. So now, now getting into the route for Cape Town Marathon. I think you can run a marathon anywhere in Cape Town, and there will be hills involved of some sort. And of course, different runners might class a hill differently. But let's say there are elevation changes. So we can maybe just chat in. Of course, you said that pacing strategies are route specific, but getting into now these suggestions that you've made into the Cape Town Marathon route.
Hey, it's Brad here from CoachParry.com. We'll get back to the podcast in just a second, but I just wanted to let you know that our personalized Coach Parry pace bands for Cape Town are available for pre-order right now. All you need to do is head over to shop.coachparry.com, put in your selected goal time, and we can print a pacing band for exactly the time you're going for. So if you're hoping for a 3-hour, 12-minute, and 26-second marathon, we can print that pacing band. Or if you're going to try and qualify for a race like Comrades or Two Oceans and you want to run a 4:59:59, that's more my style, you can put that in as well, and we'll print that band. And then make sure you get yourself a plan A, plan B, and if you need a plan C, get a plan C as well. But they are available for pre-order right now. So head over to shop.coachparry.com and put in your selected times, and we look forward to seeing you on the weekends of Cape Town.
So it really is, again, just big. So just as an aside here, if you do go to the website, they do have a route flyover, and they've got the map of the route there. You can also download the GPX file and have a look at, and you can load it onto, if you use Garmin or any other of these platforms, and you can essentially look at the route yourself, and you can see exactly what to expect. And I think it's good to know. The last thing you want is to, get to race day and think, oh, it's a fast, flat race, and then you end up with a steep hill and you think, who lied to me? So you do need to just be aware. And I think it's good. I never like to go blind into a race and not know what to expect. I also don't like to obsess about it and micromanage every little detail, because again, there's things that you can't control on race day. But I mean, just going back to start again, remember that Cape Town this year has 2 separate starts. And by now you all should have gotten your emails about which what your seed, where you're seated, what your batch number is, and what wave you're in. So that's a lot of information to remember. But really, what it tells you is what time you're starting where. And as long as you have that information, that's all that you need. And so it's going to be the 2 separate starts, either on Beach Road or the traditional start in the stadium. And when you start off, that first 5Ks of Cape Town, like, make no mistake, is not flat. So you're not going to be starting out and heading out. It's not like running Two Oceans where it's actually a net drop in the beginning and then you run along the ocean and it's nice and flat for like 21 Ks. This starts off with a bit of a climb, and you head out to the V&A waterfront. And if I recall, you end up going onto the freeway.
Yes, onto Nelson Mandela.
So that first bit, especially sort of like when you head out about 4Ks onto the route, you'll notice that you are climbing. But this is where it's important, because this is the start of the race, and this should force you to hold back. And in some ways, the route being like this does kind of force you to dial back. I remember when I ran Milton Keynes in May, the first 5Ks were also just climb for 5Ks. And it was just also the way you have to be, it holds you back. It keeps you from doing anything silly. And I know people who went out, I caught people in the second half who sped past me in that first 5K. So, if you do hold back, you can definitely pull back some of the time. But when you're on the freeway, you're going to see, it's going to be the sunrise, hopefully, if you start early enough, and you're going to see Table Mountain in front of you. I mean, like, that's just
it's beautiful.
Yeah. So I say enjoy those early moments. Just in the beginning, don't worry too much about the pace. Just keep it nice and simple, and just look around and just look at everything that Cape Town has to offer before you start working hard. And we've spoken about paces, and what you'll notice here is that, and again, with our pacing charts that take into account the route, that you'll notice that it's not going to be an even pace per 5K. So it's done per 5K, and you'll notice that you're not going to be going out. So if you're doing an even pace at 5:41 per K for a sub 41 minute, that's going to be, if I can quickly do the maths in my head, that's going to be about 28:40 around there for the 5K mark. And you might be a little bit slower than that. That's fine, because you're not running even pace, you're running even effort, and you're running according to the route. And then once you get off the highway, you're heading into Woodstock. This is where you get to a very significant climb, and it's at 6Ks, roughly about 6Ks. I am basing this off the GPX file, so of course the GPS is not 100% accurate. But at about 6Ks, you will get into a significant climb. And again, early days, do not stress. Just back off with the hill. And what you want to be doing is running even effort, not even pace. So let the hill do its thing. It will slow you down. Don't fight it. What goes up must come down. So on the other side, you will come down. But again, this is also crucial. When you are having these descents on a marathon route, do not try and make up time. So don't physically accelerate yourself down the hill. Gravity will do its thing. Just
Yeah.
let yourself ease into the hill and you'll find the balance. It will balance out over time. The problem with trying to push down these descents is that you're introducing a lot more eccentric loading. And what people often complain about is when they get to the end of a race, their quads are dead. They can't push on anymore. And that's come from pushing hard on these downhills. Uphills slow you down, downhills hurt you.
Yeah.
So just be that's where the damage comes in with hills. It's not in the uphills. The downhills are the ones that introduce muscular damage that might be causing issues. So and then once you're past that big climb and you're now in Woodstock, you're gonna be running through Woodstock. You'll run through. I hope I get the suburbs right. I was a Gauteng boy, so Cape Town was a holiday destination. I've never lived in Cape Town, but you'll run through Woodstock and you run through Observatory and you're heading towards Claremont, and you're going to be. I think you go on Victoria Road and then Main Road, and it's a long straight stretch. But again, as Jamie mentioned, you can't avoid the hills in Cape Town, so this is going to be undulating. So you are going to be seeing periods where you are going up and coming down. And again, as long as you're maintaining even effort, and this is still early, so this is between sort of like 6Ks and 15Ks. You'll get to at 9Ks, there's another biggish climb that you must be aware of, and also around 13 to 14Ks, there's going to be another climb. So that you're going to be finding these not insignificant portions where you are going up and down. But the key thing is just to maintain that even effort. And again, if you're seeing yourself slowing down, you're slowing down because of the elevation changes, not because you are not running a good race. And and at this stage, you're still only a third of the way through the race. So there's no worry at this point about what you're doing. And the word that I want you to think about here is control. You want to be running controlled, and again, just easing yourself in and making sure that you're conserving energy for the second half of the race. And then, if I recall right, you'll get to the halfway mark. Once you get to Claremont, you'll turn and you sort of do almost like a U-turn, and you head back into Rondebosch, past Rondebosch Commons, where the park run is, and then you'll get to the halfway mark. And this is where the route kind of gets nice now. I think as relatively nice as it will get. So you're still going to be seeing some undulations, but nothing as it would have been in certainly up to about 15Ks. And here you will be able to take off consistent splits. And at this point now, you do kind of want to be in your zone. So whatever your goal pace is, certainly for most of the stretch, you want to be hitting your goal pace. And so what I must say is that when you get to marathon race day, and I just want to go back a bit, like marathon pace often feels easier than you expect because you've been training hard before and you've been wondering, can I do it? But when you're tapered, marathon pace won't feel like aggressive. It's not like running a 10K. And the thing is, if you think about where it is, like marathon pace is closer to your easy run pace than it is to your 5K, 10K pace. So when you are actually tapered and ready, it will feel easier. And the temptation is that when you get to the halfway mark and you don't feel terrible, you want to push on. Don't push on. Control. Remember, you want to be controlled and you want to hold. And this little bit here in the route between sort of the halfway mark and to about 28, 29Ks is like quite a nice section. Gentle hills, gentle descents, nothing dramatic. But when you get to 21Ks and now you're heading back into the city center,
sorry, Ntutu, more closer to 28, I think.
28K, sorry. Yes.
No worries.
You're going to start climbing, and this is probably the most significant climb that you're going to hit on race day, and it's reasonably long, and it's both the timing of where it is on the route that is going to cause problems for you, and then also the difficulty of it. And again, at this point, if you need to walk, to break up the hill, do so. Slow down and just don't try and power yourself through the hill. Don't think, oh, I need to make up time to get up here, because once you crest that point, and this takes you up to the highest point on the course, which I think is about 31Ks there. And once you get to that point, you will start coming down. And again, we've spoken about the downhills. Don't now you'll be heading down Long Street and going into the city center. Please do not blitz this section. Do not go out there and try and hammer it home, because really from there until you get to Sea Point, so it's really another sort of 4Ks or so, It's
Yeah.
mostly downhill. And
It's
this
yeah.
is a
Oh.
yeah, and this is a point where you'd think to yourself, I'm going to make up a lot of time here. But what you're actually doing is you are wrecking your legs. And then when you hit the
Mm-hmm.
flat section, when you get to Sea Point and you start running and you've got the ocean to your right, and then you're heading home, you'll find that your legs are broken and that you
Yeah.
can't actually then do what you need to do. So again, let gravity do its thing. It will take care of it. You're going to be coming down. You physically will not run slower if you just ease into the hill and just run with good form, with good control, and just let your body go. And then when you
Yeah.
get to about 36Ks, that's when you hit Sea Point. And now you've got 6Ks to go.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful.
it's going to be flat. It's going to be beautiful. And you can now just start, like, now you're literally just counting down, and you're heading for home. And you will loop around, and I think at 39Ks you do a U-turn, and then you will start heading back towards the stadium. And again, you'll have the ocean now to your left as you're running back towards the stadium. And if you've paced everything well, this is where now you should be able to really now. So at 36Ks, you can now start to go for it. You can now start to pick things up and push and push and push and push. And then from 39Ks, just give it everything. Just go for it. I mean, like at this point, you're now heading for home and you're heading to the blue carpet. I've done the 10K a few times and I love that blue carpet. and hopefully then once you get to the stadium, you will have done what you need to do and achieved your goal. And really, that's the long and short of it. It's just like the route is challenging. Cape Town is not, it's a fast marathon. Like you can run a really, really good time, but a lot of it is just managing some of those significant hills, 6Ks, 9Ks, 14Ks, and then sort of around 29Ks, 28, 29Ks,
Yeah.
managing the descents, just making sure you're not hammering down the hills, and then saving yourself for that beautiful stretch from 36Ks where you can now really just go for it and then finish strong and hopefully get your PB on race day.
Yeah, just take it home for that last bit. I mean, you've already covered pretty much most of the distance, and then it's the final few kilometers. But
Yeah.
for athletes that are potentially worried about, you know, these descents, as you mentioned, wrecking your quads. I think if you have been consistent with your strength training, even if you have just been doing body weight strength training, it's better than nothing. I think you just need to be confident in the fact that you have been putting in the work. You have most likely been experiencing some form of elevation changes if you've been running outside, particularly in your long runs. At some point, you're going to have to get that. And just being confident in the fact that you have done the training. And now we are just preparing as best as we can with what we've got for race date. So if our listeners have not yet already got some sort of pacing plan, then as we spoke about last week, we are selling Coach Parry pacing charts that are specific to the route. And then we also individualize those according to your exact finishing goal. So if you say wanted to do, as Lindsay mentioned last week, a 3:05, we can make you a pacing chart for that. But also, if you are perhaps worried about the weather being hot or it being very windy, then we can also make you a option B or a plan C chart as well, in case things don't go according to plan. But our listeners, if you've been listening up until this point at least, you definitely have a plan for race date, and the pacing chart can take all of the guesswork out of it for you, so that you know, as you mentioned, when you get to the first hill, you're not surprised that it's there.
Yeah.
We first of all knew the hill was coming, but we've also taken your pacing into account. So for that, thank you, Ntutu. And as mentioned, for our listeners, if you have just recently done your longest run, go and be proud of yourself, first of all, but go and rest up, go and fuel up too, have a nice early evening, and get excited for the taper that is coming up, that we'll also be discussing more in detail next week. Thanks, Ntutu.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and everyone. Yeah, enjoy these last couple of weeks. You've worked hard, and what you are doing is magical and impressive. So keep at it and just trust the process and know that you're almost there.